Now we are going to recognize a person that has done quite a bit in golf, and I'm not going to do the introduction. That's up to others that know much more and are more eloquent than I am about it. But I want to talk to you about why this award. It is called the Jerry Tarde Courage Award. Now, many of you may not know about Jerry Tarde, and I will also tell you I don't know everything about him, but every time I'm with him and with others, when I mention that name, a reverence begins to form about Jerry Tarde. He's turning red now. That's one of the good things about white people I like. You can turn when they get embarrassed. I like that. So you can't tell about me. I can tell about Jerry, though. So in any event, I say that in all, jest, if you will. So a few years ago, I said, Jerry, we need an award, and I would like to honor you because of your support of the Expo. I will not tell you the amount, but I had never met Jerry Tarde. I simply called him and said, listen, this is what I'm doing and why I am doing it. I don't know you, Mr. Tarde, but you're one of the people that I felt I should reach out to you and tell you what we're doing. Suffice it to say, not much longer after that, he sent me an email, and it had in it a commitment. It had a dollar amount, and I will tell you it brought absolute tears to my eyes. Absolute tears to my eyes. Jerry, in and of himself, and his, or I shouldn't say his, but being editor-in-chief of Golf Digest, they have done things behind the scene that many of us will never know about, but it has affected the lives and trajectory of black folks in this game and other folks that have been overlooked. And they've done it, and they've been very clear with the industry on when they are doing it and why they're doing it. It took courage. See, we forget sometimes that the good people, the good Caucasian people that do things, sometimes they're not always popular when they do it. It does take courage. And so that is why it was so easy for me to say and to sell to Jerry, we need an award named after you. There may be others out there, but I'm working with Jerry Tarde. And I said, Jerry, we need this award, and we really need to recognize the good people that have been doing this for quite some time for the right reasons and at the right time. And whether it was popular or not was not a consideration. It was simply the right thing to do. So I'd like to call up Jerry Tarde for a second. If you'd come up, Jerry, and say a few words about the Expo. We need to give him, please stand up, give him a rousing round of applause. He hates this. I'm telling you right now, he might smack me when he come up, but I'd like for him to say just a few words about the award and the Expo, and then we'll continue on with our recognition. Mr. Jerry Tarde.
Thank you. Thank you. Jim, you're always too kind. I think when you walk around this floor and you see you experience the PGA Show and the industry of golf, you're startled by just the size of it, and I'm impressed always, and have been since I was a kid, about the quality of people who are in this game, like Jim. There's an honesty, an integrity, a respect, a professionalism, a sense of that I think exudes this industry and the people, and I think the reason I've been enthusiastic about Jim's program and identifying people who have courage to step up and support golf is kind of personified in the honoree this year. Steve Mona. I mean, Steve's the one who should have his name on a Courage Award. I met Steve about 44 years ago when he started working for the USGA in the press relations department, and he's an old journalism student, so we have a lot in common. Steve, in my mind, is the George Herbert Walker Bush of the golf industry, of golf administrators. He's by that I mean that he's the smartest, the most experienced. He's had the most varied resume. He's held important jobs in every facet of the industry. He's the most well-rounded gentleman, and he really demonstrates an experience that's greater than just about anybody else that walks these floors. And he's a doer and not just a talker. And I think that's the impact of what he has done, is what we may not identify him with the results, but a lot of it has to do with Steve Mona's imprint on these ideas. And that's why this award is so important. In the past, we've honored Jim Autry and Commissioner Tim Fincham, and they also kind of demonstrate the same kind of qualities that Steve does. Steve was a tournament director in Northern California. He was an executive director of the State Association in Georgia. He was CEO of the Golf Course Superintendents. He was head of the World Golf Foundation. He oversaw the World Golf Hall of Fame. He served on virtually every board of significance in the industry. And from every one of those perches, he's looked out for diversity, inclusion, the little guy and the little woman. As much as anybody I know, he's been a champion of minority golfers, and that's kind of why we're brought together. He took advocacy from a conversation to a full-blown movement at the highest levels of government. He recreated National Golf Day, which had been around forever, but he reimagined it as a way to lobby Congress and Washington. And I've been there in DC witnessing his passion firsthand. And he's promoted golf, black golf history every step of the way. He's even in the National Black Golf Hall of Fame. I can't imagine a more deserving winner of the African American Golf Expo's Courage Award. And he's a friend to me, and he's a friend to everybody in this room, and most of all, he's been a friend of golf. And he still has that boyish look and charm that I remember from 1981 when we played golf together for the first time. So I don't know if you want Steve to come up right now, but Steve, please come up and receive this award.
Before you present, I want Cooper to sit.
Okay.
Y'all can just sit right here.
Steve?
Yeah. Cooper's going to say a few words.
Michael's going to say
Okay. How you doing, brother? Listen, we have a special guest. Everybody knows Dr. Michael Cooper. Coop, Michael. I call him a lot of other names, but they're all good names. But I have found him to be such a dear friend. I might even start crying. Coop he's affected my life in this game. He's placed a lot of trust and confidence in me, and I hope I earn it every day. What I do, it is for us. Coop has taught me so much. This is not selfish. We do this for us, man. And women, we do this for us. And I've learned so much watching him work, how to work, what to do, when to do it, and how to do it. I can't think of a better person to come up and talk about Steve Mona than Coop, but I want to personally thank you, my friend, for getting me involved in this tremendous game in this industry. Dr. Michael Cooper.
I don't think that was scripted, Jim. Get choked up like that. I can tell you all the accolades you gave me. I really appreciate it, but I'll tell you I learned so much just by watching Steve Mona. I had the privilege of working for and under Steve Mona from 2008 to 2015, I believe it was. And those qualities that you talked about, I got from him. I never met a man calmer under pressure and more adamant to do the right thing than Steve Mona. And I'll back up a little bit. I'll mention something I heard from Ernie Ellison back in his days when he's in the back there, when he was shutting down, he was retiring. And Ernie made a statement that this is not a race, it's a marathon. The baton has to be passed at some point. And that stuck with me, and I started, as Jim told me, he wanted me to say a few words about Steve Mona. I thought about that, and I'll tell you a part that Jim didn't cover. Back in the 1990s, who kept this momentum, who started a lot of the momentum in this inclusion race, marathon, is Jerry Tarde. There's a gentleman who I learned a lot from named John Merchant, the late John Merchant, and Lou Horn, and Barbara Douglas, and all of them back in an era in the 1990s when the movement caught fire after some unfortunate things. And there were symposiums held, and the money to keep that thing churning came from Jerry Tarde and USGA, is my understanding in reading history books. They kept that movement going, and as movements do, they have ebb and flows. And through the 1990s, that movement was rocking and rolling. And then it hit a lull, as movements do, back in the early 2000s. And I was with the World Golf Foundation and the first tee that I started at in 2002. And that movement needed some energy. And in 2008, Steve Mona was hired as CEO of the World Golf Foundation. He took it upon himself to try to ignite this movement one more time, to try to do the right thing, and he had some confidence in me, Mike Cooper, to help out with that. And he pretty much, I followed his lead and he directed me, and we tried to make a position of it, a permanent position of it, and golf wasn't ready for that yet, didn't have budgets for that, and Steve, within himself, said, we're going to keep it going. If we can't do it with a position, we'll do it by committee. And he started a committee. At that time, they had something called Golf 2020. Many of you who've been around seasoned remember Golf 2020. We had a diversity task force within that. Golf 2020 became We Are Golf. Steve would coach me. I would take things to him that I probably thought were possible, but they weren't, because we needed board improvement. And I found out early on just what Steve could do. Steve would say things to me like, I got to get amen from the board on something of that nature. I got to get amen from a board on that. Let's talk about something that I can do. I know we can activate and keep going. So we had to play tit for tat. We had to discuss things that we knew he could do under his command and his leadership versus things that he couldn't do because he needed board approval. So we stayed right at the gray spot, right at that gray spot, that Steve could get it done without, under his command, without going any further to the board. And as Ernie said about passing the baton, I felt like Mr. Tarde passed the baton to Steve Mona to reignite this movement, and he did a great job of it. Jerry Tarde carried it through the 90s, had a little lull. Steve Mona grabbed it in 2008, and right up to his retirement, he carried it again. And then we all know it morphed into Make Golf Your Thing following some incidents in Minneapolis in the pandemic. But I think it's appropriate, Jim, that you name that after Jerry Tarde, the Courage Award. Certainly it took courage from him after an unfortunate incident to get this thing going. Passed it along to Steve Mona. He carried that thing again up until the time that he left, and then we had another unfortunate moment, and it ignited once again. So the ebb and flows of movements, they happen in every social movement, and Steve and I, we've always categorized this as a social movement, this thing for inclusion as a social movement. I don't know where it's going to go. I don't think anybody does right now, but I think that award is fitting, that for 2 decades, these two right here on this stage from a golf industry standpoint, they carried the movement, and I'm proud to have known them and be a part of anything that comes out of their mouth. I'm quite proud of it. So, Jim, thank you for asking me to say a few words.
Steve, this kind of feels like the old program, This Is Your Life. It wasn't meant to be that, but it's kind of turning out that way. I'd ask Craig Kirby to come up and say a couple of words, and then, Jerry, I'm going to turn it back over to you. You can make the presentation, and Steve, I guess we want to let you say a couple of words anyway, okay?
Got something to say?
I bet you do.
Good afternoon, everybody. What a treat and an honor to be up here with Jim Beattie and to follow Jerry Tarde and Dr. Michael Cooper. Let me just say this. Life is not a mystery to be solved, but a reality to be experienced. Steve Mona, over the years, has provided experiences and opportunities for people of all levels of society within the golf industry. Steve's devotion is evidenced by actions, not words, because of his understanding that to make a difference, you have to know there is a difference. Jerry shared with you his experiences, his roles, his titles, which is why he was inducted into the 2021 National Black Golf Hall of Fame. And yes, today, this morning, this afternoon, you received the prestigious Jerry Tarde Courage Award at the 2025 African American Golf Expo and Forum. I first met Steve when he was at the World Golf Foundation back in May of 2014. And that day I had an opportunity to share with Steve our mission, the mission of Golf, My Future, My Game, our purpose, and our goals. And after a few hours of back and forth, Steve looked at me in my eye and he said, "Craig, a very well thought out program, and I look forward to your growth over the years. Right now, I do not have a check for you, but an opportunity you can take, and I will be here to support your efforts." It was Steve's encouragement and his support over the years that has led Golf My Future to have programs in 4 cities across the country, with 2 more starting this spring and summer. Steve's imagination and commitment over his career highlights the words of Jackie Robinson, who said, "A life is not important except in the impact it has on others." A husband, a father, a grandfather, a leader, and an innovator who understands the changing character of the times. Steve Mona, congratulations. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Steve Mona and Jerry Tarde.
No, you've heard enough from me. This is the Courage Award. Please,
Okay.
let's accept the.
Okay. Well, thank you, Jerry. To receive an award, Jerry, with your name on it, with previous recipients, including Tim Fincham and Jim Autry, is a very high honor, and I appreciate that. Jim Beattie, thank you for thinking of me. I think I generally agree with everything that's been said. I think it's a little over the top, but so be it. But Jim, the fact that you thought of me in this context means the world to me. Mike Cooper, I think you know how I feel about you. There's nobody in the game that I'm aware of that's put more time, effort, and personal funds into trying to create greater diversity and inclusion and equity in the game than Mike Cooper. If there is, I don't know who that person is. Craig Kirby, thank you for those kind words. It's interesting how you meet people in life, and Craig, you just always had that twinkle in your eye. Your energy was tremendous, and I do remember that day that we met in May of 2014, and I'm so glad 11 years later how golf, my future, and my game has continued to progress and grow so dramatically. So I first want to say that I'm extremely pleased with what's happening in the golf industry now with respect to DE&I. Specifically, the Make Golf Your Thing effort and the specific efforts around Make Golf Your Game, Make Golf Your Career, Make Golf Your Business are tremendous. And I applaud the commissioners and/or CEOs of the LPGA, the PGA of America, the PGA Tour, and the USGA for their commitment, for the resources that they've put behind it. It seems to me for the first time in a long time that we actually have some things hardwired now into the game that are not going to be sort of the flavor of the month. And that's tremendous. And I also want to recognize, while I'm at it, the Augusta National Golf Club and the Masters Tournament Foundation. While they're not a formal part of Make Golf Your Thing, they're doing some pretty impactful things in Augusta, whether it's the local college, whether it's the local golf course. So don't think that Augusta National doesn't have a heart for what's going on with respect to DE&I, so I did want to mention them as well. And even though he's not here, I want to recognize Andrew Yeast, my colleague for 6 years. Andrew's moved on to a new position with the North Florida PGA as their new executive director, but for that period of time, he helped to administer Make Golf Your Thing. He kept things moving, and he deserves a lot of credit. But I also want to recognize that, I'll just speak for myself, a lot of us suffer from recency bias, and so not to diminish in any way what's happened with respect to Make Golf Your Thing, which is great, but I do think it's important to understand the historical context to what got us to where we are today. So at the risk of sounding like that old guy that just wants to talk about back in my day, I did want to take you on a little bit of a journey, and I'm just going to relate it to my own experience with diversity, inclusion, and equity in the game. And it actually goes back to 1983. So Jerry mentioned we met in 1981. In 1983, I became the executive director, as he mentioned, of the Georgia State Golf Association in Atlanta. At the time that I arrived, there were no women who were members of the association, and there were no public golf courses that were members of the association. So it was effectively a private club association for men, and to be candid about it, white men. So we immediately took steps to welcome women into the organization and to welcome public golf courses into the organization. And not only did that obviously boost our membership rolls, it also created a whole new dynamic within the association. The women got involved right away. Many of them went on to serve as president of the GSGA. Took a little longer from the public golf sector, and candidly a little longer for full integration of people of color into the organization, but that's happened. In fact, right now, Ralph Stokes is the president of the GSGA. He's the first African-American president in its nearly 100-year history. So progress, sometimes slow, but progress nonetheless. In 1994, as Jerry mentioned, I became the CEO of the Golf Course Superintendents Association of America. That organization, just based upon kind of how things evolved over time, if you looked at the profile of a golf course superintendent, pretty much white male. We couldn't really impact that directly, but we took a lot of measures both to impact our diversity at the staff level. Our staff was about 120 people. Now we were in Lawrence, Kansas, which isn't exactly a hotbed of diversity on its own, but we hired, some of you may remember the late Lainey Griffin. She was our first DE&I officer. It wasn't even called that back then, but she helped us both from a staff perspective and a membership perspective. So what we did was we tried to engender more interest in the profession among students and other people entering the profession, knowing that over time they would ascend to golf course superintendent roles. And I'm proud to tell you, this was after my time, that Rafael Barajas became the first Hispanic president of the GCSA. That's been 5-7 years or so ago. Here's one thing you need to know about Rafael. When he moved to the United States, he's a Mexican national. He did not speak English. Think about that. But he became the president of the GCSA approximately 25 years later. Pretty impressive. Later, GCSA, and this was after my time, undertook an initiative to bring more women into the industry. They have a women's leadership forum now. There hasn't yet been a female president of GCSAA, but that time's coming. In 2008, as Mike mentioned, I joined the World Golf Foundation. And as Mike mentioned, despite my best efforts, or at least I thought my best efforts, we were actually never able to get any formal funding for DE&I. As Mike mentioned, we started out, and in fact, it was going to be Mike. I wanted to hire a director of diversity to basically work with all the governing bodies who the board of the World Golf Foundation, if you're not familiar, consists of the commissioner of the LPGA, the chairman of the Masters Tournament, the CEO of the PGA of America, the commissioner of the PGA Tour, the CEO of the USGA, the CEO of the RNA, Royal and Ancient Golf Club of St. Andrews, Scotland, and the commissioner of the PGA European Tour. I was not successful, but as Mike mentioned, we were able to do things basically on a shoestring. A few people, I'm going to mention a few people here in a moment, but I do want to mention specifically Dr. Bill Crouch, who at the time was the president of Georgetown College, not Georgetown University, Renee Powell, who probably all of you know, and the late Franco Harris, of all people. They were at the first organizational meeting we held back at the World Golf Foundation, probably in 2009. It was great having Franco there because Franco could draw a crowd, let me tell you, but he did also bring some visibility and even credibility to the effort. So that was the launch point. Mike, as he mentioned, he's extremely modest. Mike became the first chair of the Diversity Task Force, and he took that on with great enthusiasm, as you only have to spend a minute with him to know that he would. It's interesting, we created 4 different areas of focus. They were suppliers to the golf industry, careers in the golf industry, competitive play, and recreational play. That was in 2000, probably 9, I'm guessing at that point, probably. And it was interesting that all these years later, when Make Golf Your Thing organized, they had those same 3 categories. So it seemed like some vindication for how we organized it back in the day. Suppliers, so Gina Rizzi, some of you know Gina, she took that on. We conducted the first diverse suppliers forum at the World Golf Hall of Fame. Remember, this is with no budget, okay? All these things are happening. Careers, Steve Schloss with the USGA, he's since retired. Some of you know Steve. He kind of took that over. We conducted the first Future Leaders Symposium. In fact, I saw Brandon Johnson last night. He was a member of that class of Future Leaders. Also at that time, and I take no credit for this, but the American Junior Golf Association, Stephen Hamlin, is its head, started the AJGA intern program. That's been tremendous. That had already existed, but they put more of an emphasis on diverse participation in that program. That's led to a lot of people entering into the golf industry that otherwise wouldn't have. Competitive play, we immediately partnered up with the Advocates, now the Advocates PGA. A fellow by the name of Ken Bentley was the head of that at the time. And I have to recognize the PGA Tour here as well. I did go to the tour. We met with Ken, and the vision for the tour, it was very small at the time, was tremendous. And that was one time where I said to the tour, and specifically to Charlie Zink and Ty Votah, we really need to get behind this. And the PGA Tour made a substantial commitment at that time. I think really helped put the Advocates into a different plane. And since then, it's just been unbelievable. The Farmers' involvement, Cisco's involvement, playing on the back end of the Farmers Insurance Classic this weekend, ironically enough. Not lost on me. Also not lost on me that Monday was Martin Luther King Day as well. I'll have something to say about him in a second. And then the AJGA again stepped up with their ACE grant. So a lot happened there. Recreational play, some of you might recall we started an initiative called Get Golf Ready. That wasn't specifically a diversity initiative, but it did help us in that regard as well. So that's what we did in those 4 areas, again, really with no funding. I do think it's important, and I'm sorry I'm probably going to sound like an old fossil here, but there are a lot of people that have made a lot of tremendous commitments to this effort through the years, and I just want to make sure that they get recognized. So from the minority community, if you will, Mike Cooper, who's here, Mark Lowry, who's here, Renee Powell, Ken Bentley, Jim Beatty, who's here, Craig Kirby, who's here, Wendell Haskins, Ernie Ellison, who's here, John Simpson, Harold Dunovit, Joe Louis Barrow, and then, unfortunately, the late John Merchant, the late Lou Horn, the late Barbara Douglas, and the late Bill Dickey. And look, I thought about this, and I said, anytime you start naming people, you're going to miss some. And I recognize that I probably have, but I can only do it from the standpoint of the people that I interfaced with during my career, and that's a pretty exhaustive list. If I miss somebody, my apologies, but I think I covered the waterfront there. And then from, Jerry used the term when he called me about this award, the majority community, if you will. But there are people there that really could be maybe future recipients of this because they really stepped up. Stephen Hamblin, for sure, with the AJGA. Jerry Tarde, Gina Rizzi, Rick Summers, Steve Schloss, Sandy Cross, and then most recently, Mark Simon. These are all people that did things they didn't have to do. They're fine doing their jobs the way they do them. There wouldn't have been any issue, but they saw the need and just the righteousness, if you will, of stepping up. So I want to leave you with a few thoughts. So I get asked, I was asked several times through the year, so Steve, why is this so important to you? Why do you have this passion for this? And so I give people, as people probably know about me, I tend to speak in threes, but there's a reason for that. People remember things in threes, remember things in threes. So I had three answers to why this was so important to me. First of all, it was the right thing to do, okay? So I'm no scientist, I'm no medical doctor, but I do know that 99.9% of our DNA is identical. So all of us in this room, we're basically all the same people. What separates us is 0.1% from a DNA perspective. And I realize DNA is pretty vast, but just think about that for a minute. So my thought was, why should a certain group of people not have access just because of that 0.1%? The second reason, as it relates to this point, was my father, actually. So my dad was successful in business, and later in his career, he was president of the western region of a pretty good size manufacturing company that manufactured spices to certain companies. You may have heard of one of their customers, a little company called McDonald's. So it was a pretty big company. My dad ran the western region, and the executive offices were attached to the plant. So I was sort of a nerdy kid in some respects. I played sports, played golf, but I also liked business at a young age. So I was probably about 14 years old. I asked my dad to take me to work one day with him, which he did. So what he would do every day, as he later explained to me, when he would get to work, he would walk through the plant first before he ever walked into his office, okay? That plant, so this is 1971, okay? So I'm giving my age away. Northern California, I will tell you, if it wasn't 100%, it was 99% of those workers in that plant were Hispanic. And I'm pretty sure none of them spoke English as a native language. When my dad walked through there, first of all, he knew everybody. They were coming up to him, hugging him. Back when that wasn't a thing, there were no man hugs going on in 1971. He knew, it was incredible. He knew something about every person. He asked about their kids, the whole thing. So I watched this for about 15 minutes or so. Then we went into his office, and I said to myself then, as a 14-year-old, I said, if I ever get in a position of authority, that's exactly how I'm going to be. So I tried to live up to the example that he set. Second reason, this is more practical, but my job for many years was to drive greater interest and participation in the game, okay? That was my job. So my idea was I wanted all segments of society to have access to our game. Why would you want to have certain segments not have access to it? We were never going to achieve our promise as an industry if we didn't. Reason number two. Reason number three, I happen to believe, and I think probably most of you in this room agree, that golf is the greatest game ever invented. I really believe that. I also believe that golf is the greatest industry in which to work. I say this, I've been in the industry now, this is my 45th year. I literally can name on one hand, and I probably have a few fingers left over, either someone I met in golf or played golf with that I'd rather not spend time with again. And trust me, I've met and played golf with thousands of people during that time. It's just that kind of sport and that kind of industry. So I wanted to make sure that everybody in our country would have access to the beautiful game that I think golf is and the wonderful industry it is as well. So I also get asked through the years, or have been asked a number of times, so what can I do to help, all right? So again, I've got three answers for you. There are actually three quotes. And this first one, Jerry, I don't know if you coined this, but you wrote this in one of your columns, I believe, and that is, what would you do if you had no fear? You remember that? That little quote, by the way, Jerry, you don't know this. When you wrote it, I typed it up and I had it blown up, and right behind my desk when I came in every single morning, that quote was staring me in the face. And Mike, that helped us do a lot of what we did, because I tried to have no fear as it related to this. Quote number one. Quote number two, Martin Luther King Day Monday, I want to quote Martin Luther King Jr. The time is always right to do the right thing. Think about that. The time is always right to do the right thing. That was also a guiding principle. The third quote, and this too, along with Jerry's quote, greeted me every morning when I went into my office. Arthur Ashe. Start where you are, use what you have, do what you can. Now, if everybody did that, we could, whatever the cause is, we could just make such great fundamental difference. But those were the words I tried to live by, and those were words, so for the younger people in the room, if you're wondering, or if you don't have the job title that people like Jerry and I were fortunate enough to have for most of our careers, you can still make a difference. So I wanted to thank you for a couple things. First, thank you for indulging me and let me give you a little historical perspective on my journey through golf as it related to DE&I. And mostly, thank you for this wonderful honor, which I'll cherish all the rest of the days of my life. Thank you very much.
Again, with these two special gentlemen, if anyone has any questions of Jerry or of Steve, this would be a great time. I just ask for you to come up to the mic. I see Ernie Ellison's coming up. Yes, sir.
I don't have a question. Is the mic on? Yeah. But I would like to make a comment. Michael mentioned the passing the baton. I'm going to go back before the baton was passed. I first met Steve in 1997, and at the request of my CEO, your awardee last year, which was Jim Archery, Jim said, if we're going to make an impact in this golf industry, you need to know Steve Mona. So Steve and I became very good friends, and around the same time, Jerry, I started to know Jerry as well. But one of the things that Steve did not mention was, I don't remember the year, but Steve actually held the very first minority conference led by a CEO in the industry. It was held out, it was two, held out in Lawrence, Kansas, and there were not only people from the industry, but people outside the industry that were given a voice to some of the things we should be doing. So Steve has been at this, as you said, a long time, but more targeted, and not just ad hoc thing, but it's been focused. And throughout his career, it has even been continuing that focus. So it wasn't like, you scatterbrain type of thing. Steve was not like that. And one thing about Jerry, I will say this as well. We needed someone to help tell our stories at PGA of America. And at that time, what's his name? I forget his name. The writer. What's your writer? Black guy. Pete McDaniel.
I'm going to tell Pete.
Don't tell him. But Jerry and our CEO were very close. So Jerry insisted that Pete will be at our events and cover stories that was happening within the industry, positive stories, and also he could be critical on us as well to keep us focused. So with a combination of these two gentlemen here, there's some history that you really don't know, but they've been at this for a long time, and it's nice to see that they're still carrying a baton, and they're on the way, and that we are now pitching in to help them realize some of the dreams that they put in place long before. So congratulations to you, Steve, and thank you very much, Jerry. And my friend, you're doing a wonderful job.
Thank you, Ernie. And let me say, Ernie referenced Pete McDaniel. Pete was scheduled to be here. He did notify me yesterday that he's in Atlanta and his flight was canceled, but he had planned to be here, so his heart's with us. John Hagler.
Yeah, Steve, first of all, I've never had an opportunity to meet you. So I'm John Hagler. I'm the chair of the Pro Duffers National Foundation. So I want to commend you, first of all, for having the courage to do what you did in a time where it wasn't, it was unpopular. But when you, and I don't want to bring politics into this conversation, but when you look at what we're facing in terms of rollbacks with DE&I, everyone talks about the Tiger effect. And this is a fact. So, 2-3 decades ago, it was only 7 golfers that made over $7 million. Fast forward 20 years later, there were 150 golfers making $10 million more or more a year. So everyone's looking for the next Tiger Woods, but I just want to ask you, how does the game get to the next level without making DE&I, doubling down on that? Because viewership is up, the number of golfers is playing the game is up, merchandise sales are up. I just want to hear your perspective because we're all, we're invested in that, and that's what I'm curious about.
Yeah. No, first of all, pleasure to meet you. Great question. And so the thing that we tried to do for years, and like I said in my remarks, I think it's starting to happen, was to get the movement, as Mike calls it, which I 100% agree, hardwired into the game. It couldn't just be this organization's DE&I effort or that organization's DE&I effort. It had to be the industry coming together, putting the necessary funding behind it. And that's always a critical issue, right? If you don't have money, you can do a lot with sweat equity like we did. But realistically, even I think we did a lot of good things, but really just we more or less just set the framework for what ended up happening with Make Golf Your Thing. Unfortunately, the circumstances that led to it were very regrettable, obviously. But if you look at it on a positive note, it did bring the industry together. So to your question, how do we make it where we don't even have to be talking about it? And that was always my dream. And I told Mike this through the years too. I just hoped that we'd have a day where we didn't have to have a diversity task force and we didn't have to have a D&I effort because it was just integrated into our game. So I think that we're moving in the right direction. I hope and I pray, being a man of faith, that the leaders of the golf industry will continue to put the money behind it, but also they are deputizing a lot of their staff members to take time away from their jobs to focus on this effort. So that needs to continue. So those are my answers, kind of a long answer to a short question. I think we're moving in the right direction. I don't think we're there. I don't want to give the impression that we are, but if we continue where we've been over the last several years, I think we'll get there. So that's what my dream is. Okay, Ty. Oh, by the way, so under the heading of missing somebody, so I missed Ty. So sorry, Ty, as you go, but go ahead.
It's all right. Steve, I just want to say thank you again. When I decided to pick up this and take the torch of United Golfers Association and bring it back in 2020, Andy Walker and I we kind of had a good sense of what we wanted to do and how to bring it back and preserve the history of the organization, but then what do we do moving forward? And you were one of those first phone calls that we made. Mm-hmm. We did have lunch with Jim Autry, and we, talked to you and had calls with you, but you stayed with us, and I know you introduced us to East, and now he's doing some great things coming forward in Florida, so we're looking forward to that as well.
Right.
But I just want to say thank you. I think a lot of us are in the room and we're already there, but some of us are trying to get there.
Right.
And in the midst of trying to get there still, except we will be trying to get there still for a long time.
Right.
But we do appreciate your dedication and to everything what we're doing, because Jim is right behind you. He's pulling. Everybody in this room is pulling to do things that are different. But as we look to do things that are the same, when it comes to in the golf industry, you have stayed consistent. So your consistency is a pillar and very rewarding to all of us. So thank you again for always being a beacon of light for the industry. Thanks so much.
You're welcome. Yeah, thank you, Ty. I appreciate it. And that's a very important organization you're leading. And my only regret is at the time that you got that reignited, I was on my way out at the World Golf Foundation. I was actually a consultant at that point, so I didn't have the authority and kind of the span of control that I did back in the day, but I was happy to do the little bit I was, and I commend you for what you're doing. So thanks for those words.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Jerry. Can we give them another round of applause, please?